One woman on Reddit decided to just treat her husband like an employee. And I think she got it exactly right. When did you last try to talk to your husband about sharing the load only to stop? Because managing his reaction was harder than just doing it yourself. That is what I mean by managing his feelings. And most of us have been doing it so long we don't even notice anymore. I'm Zoe. I work in public health, which means it's literally my job to ask why patterns exist rather than just accepting them. I'm also a coach and a working mum, and I hear versions of this story constantly. Here's the first post. It's from Reddit, and OP says, I am the dictionary definition of a successful modern woman. Kids are wonderfully cared for, house is clean and beautiful, job, I'm fucking crushing it. Nice. And I love what I do. I have the degrees, the professional certifications, the fitness routines, the home sewn Halloween costumes, the red dye free snacks, wow, okay, high quality dog food, and family photos all on lock, and I love it all. So why the hell does my husband, who makes less, does less, and cares less, get to benefit more? She goes on, dude does nothing but care for himself and acts like I'm gravely insulting his mother if I ever dare bring this up. About 4 months ago, after tons of therapy and near burnout, I started putting the smallest of boundaries in place. Asking for reliable help with emptying the trash, being responsible for the registration of his own car. Okay. Even the most gentle communication from me triggered man tantrums. Mantrums? So you know what? I started treating him like an underperforming employee. Here are your tasks. Here is your deadline. I don't want your excuses, and I don't give a shit if it's hard or hurts your feelings. Figure it out. And then this. As soon as I stopped internalizing his crap and his mantrums, I had so much more energy for my kids, for myself. I no longer found myself snapping at them for random little things. It's like my brain suddenly had the space to meet them where they were, because I was no longer wasting that energy on doing so for my adult husband. She's still heading for divorce. She's still not getting adequate help. Nothing structurally changed. So why do I think this is worth sharing? She got part of herself back. She says, my brain suddenly had space. And that is not just a feeling. That is something researchers have been measuring for years. So there's a researcher called Alison Daminger. She identified 4 stages of what she calls cognitive household labor. So anticipating, identifying, deciding, monitoring. So women carry the invisible ends, the anticipating, so knowing that the sports kit needs washing before it becomes a crisis, the monitoring, so tracking 17 things simultaneously so nothing drops. At work, that is project management. It's a paid job. At home, it's called being a mum. And a 2025 review of the research found that this mental load is directly associated with women's depression, burnout, and relationship breakdown. Not loosely connected, directly associated. So when she says she's got her energy back, the moment that she stopped absorbing his reactions, she's describing something measurable. She freed up cognitive capacity, and it went straight to her children. One commenter put it like this: your partner depended on you being high income and low self-esteem. The minute you started getting mentally stronger, he lost his easiest target. And so what does that mean? He wasn't coasting by accident. The arrangement was working for him. She was delivering enough to keep everything running, but doubting herself enough not to challenge it. That is not dysfunction. That is a system that was working perfectly well for one of them. And she replied to this commenter saying, I never considered that he recognized, consciously or not, that I was an easy target. So she'd been treating this as a communication problem, a compatibility problem. The comment reframes it entirely. This wasn't broken for both of them. So now go back to how she described herself at the start. Degrees, professional certifications, crushing it at work, red dye, free snacks. So this is not a woman who lacks awareness. This is not a woman who doesn't know her worth. And she was still in it. That is the point I want you to take. Because this pattern does not care how successful you are. It does not care how educated or switched on you are. It lives in the gap between what you know and what you have spent your entire life being conditioned to feel responsible for. That conditioning did not come from nowhere. It was handed to you by a culture with a very specific interest in your compliance. Now, before I get to the next post, I can already hear the response like, yeah, but that's what happens when you marry a wanker. But look, sometimes, yes. But this dynamic does not require a wanker to exist, because sometimes we are the ones keeping it in place. I know, I've done it. The research calls it maternal gatekeeping. Basically, we take back the task because he didn't do it the right way. We don't hand things over because we're already calculating the fallout if it goes wrong. We stay the expert, he stays the assistant. And then we're furious that nothing changes. I did a whole video on this, a mum who deliberately let things fall apart for 2 weeks, let him fail, and then let him fix it. So it's worth watching, and I will link it below. So the cruel irony is that it's completely rational. In this system, you are the one who pays when something drops. Of course you don't want to let go. But here's the thing. Post 1 is the extreme version, a marriage that is heading for divorce. And post 2 is a version that lives inside perfectly ordinary relationships, the friction that's just always there. low level, background noise, easy to dismiss because nothing is actually broken. That version is what I want to talk about because I think it's more common and more insidious than one that ends in divorce. So, the second post. He writes, 13 weeks I have been in evening classes online. I feed the kids before class. He, I'm guessing she means her husband, doesn't have to plan dinner or shop for it. Just make it, following a recipe, 2 nights a week. The only nights I've been able to peacefully participate in class is when he has been out of town. Tonight's class was about trauma and toxicity. Sorry, I don't know why that made me smirk. And they felt he needed to empty and refill the dishwasher as loudly as possible before he could begin to cook. Then he messed up the recipe with much pot banging and complaining. Dinner was fine, he just hadn't let it simmer long enough. He is yelling at the kids to leave me alone as if them asking me a quick question is anywhere near as disruptive as his yelling. And then them crying about his yelling. Yeah, I've been there. My class finishes, I confront him and he pulls it, I get it, I'm just a failure routine. I had to cut the fight off because my youngest cries when anyone yells, obviously. And now he is hurt in some way. He has been for 20 years. We have a fight, he knows it's his fault, and I can't be mad at him because he hurts. Okay, so just to put this into a bit of context, when she says he hurts, not like he hurts, like, oh, I'm so hurt. He feigns an injury. She cleared it up in one of the comments when someone was like, what does he mean by hurt? He feigns an injury. He says his back hurts. So anyway, she's reduced her ask to the absolute minimum. She's fed the children before her class. She's not even left the building. She's online in her own home. So asking only that he follow a recipe twice a week. And he's banging pots. One commenter said, I'm sorry, but this man is actively sabotaging your education and self-improvement. And another went further and was like, he is sabotaging your schoolwork because you might improve yourself and get a better job and leave him. Because Reddit is always quite extreme. But, you know, whether that's true consciously or not, partners who benefit from the current arrangement have a vested interest in that arrangement not changing. And I want to leave his motives to one side because honestly, they don't change what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is the I'm a failure move. So she says he's done this for over 20 years, every time. And it's worked because every time he does it, she stops and she manages and she steps back in. So that is not a communication problem. That is a learned pattern with a reliable outcome. He feels something uncomfortable. He makes it her fault. She absorbs it to keep the peace. The original request disappears. She's being trained to stop making the request. And that is what managing his feelings actually costs. Not just exhausting, self-erasing. Every time you absorb his reaction to your reasonable request, you confirm to yourself that the request was the problem. That your need for help, for space, for your own growth is the thing creating the difficulty. And it wasn't. His response was. So think of it like a leaking pipe. You can get better at mopping the floor. You can become incredibly efficient at it. But if you never fix the pipe, you're mopping forever. The communication is the mop. The structural inequality is the pipe. And no amount of better mopping fixes a plumbing problem. The pipe needs fixing. And that is a different conversation entirely. What I can tell you, and this is where I start with women I coach, is the first move. She's lying in bed, replaying the pot banging, running it over and over. And here's what I would say to her. What actually happened? Not the story around it, the fact. The thing a camera in a room would have captured. He banged pots while she was in a class. That is a circumstance. It's inarguable. The thought that his discomfort is her problem to solve, that keeping him emotionally comfortable is the price of keeping the peace, that if she stops absorbing it, everything falls apart. That is not a fact. That is purely a thought. And one that she's been thinking for so long that I bet it feels like truth. And unlike the pots and pans, that sentence is something she can work on. The woman in post 1 has started to do exactly that. She still has an unequal marriage. She's still heading for divorce, as she says, but she stopped waiting for him to respond well before she allowed herself to feel okay. And her cognitive capacity came back, and she gave it to her kids. So that is not justice, but it was a real move, and it was available to her the whole time. So this is actually where I start with the women that I coach. Not with fixing everything, not with the marriage, the mental load, the career, all of it at once, but with identifying the one thing that is actually within your control right now and working on that first. The circumstance does not have to change first. That is not acceptance. That is how you get clear-headed enough to actually do something about it. So if you came for the gossip and stayed for the insight, then consider subscribing. There is plenty more where that came from, and I hope I see you in the next video.